Robert, right, Mayor?
Yes, Robert
Robert.
Brennan, yes.
Sergeant.
I'm sorry.
Sergeant.
Sergeant, thank you. Robert.
First item on the agenda this evening, we've got Chief Scharschmidt here with Miranda Brody, our Animal Control Officer. I've asked them to do some research looking into trying to come up with some methods, options to do, the first item is to control the deer population, to see what we can do to try to decrease the number of deers in Parma Heights. So Miranda will address that, as well as another issue that she's brought to our attention, animal cruelty. So with that, I will turn the meeting over to Miranda. It's all yours.
Great. Hi, thank you guys. All right, so we're just going to get right into this. So we have two ordinances that are applicable to what I'm going to be talking about. The first is 618.13, feeding animals and wildlife, and the other is 618.21, hunting, poisoning, and trapping prohibited. The first one I'm going to address is the feeding animals and wildlife. This ordinance is very well written. I think some language that would be beneficial to have in there is something to the effect that residents cannot feed deer. Most complaints that I get in regards to feeding wildlife are specifically about the deer. We do have some language in this ordinance that you can leave feed out if it's elevated 48 inches, but as I'm sure you guys know, most deer are well taller than that. They have complete access to it. So I think having something to the effect of residents can't feed deer will help us in keeping the herds moving along so they're not so concentrated in specific areas. Any questions on that?
I have one.
Sure.
So you're gonna leave wild animal in there and deer, like include and deer?
Yeah, what we were thinking about is in the, like, for example, section A, no person shall feed any feral cat in the city, just to add another section, no person shall feed any deer within the city.
Okay. Did you think about moving the 48-inch elevation higher?
I think that that won't really be able to negate the complaint. So for instance, when I go to someone's house and it's a feeding deer complaint, regardless of how high they move it, if the deer has access to it, if there's something clear cut for me to say, hey, you can't feed the deer, then that ends the conversation. Okay, then moving on. Okay, so for our hunting, trapping, and poisoning prohibited, in this ordinance, we do have a section that allows the bow hunting of deer. In the current language that we have, it's impossible for someone to apply for this program. So my opinion on it would just be to remove this language completely. If we can't do it, then why do we have it on the books?
Wait, can you say that first part again? It's impossible for
Sure,
somebody?
it's impossible to comply with the regulations that we have currently for bow hunting deer. We did have several meetings with ODNR in regards to this, and the overall opinion that I gathered from it was a culling program isn't necessarily a culling program. At most, you would get 1 or 2 deer down a season, and that won't really do much with the herds that we have here. So if we can't do it, and even if we did try to do it, if it wouldn't really help, what's the point of having the language in the ordinance?
So are you talking about just getting rid of the crossbow and bow, longbow language?
Correct.
So then what do they have to do then? Are you saying nobody can get a permit to do any deer culling?
Even the language that we have right now, it would be impossible in Parma Heights to do it. You need 5 continuous acres in order to bow hunt.
Right, but it was my understanding when we did this was that if they got 5 acres, neighbors and everybody together, then they could do that. That satisfied that part of the ordinance.
I think that even if, well, we did have one resident try to do it, and she wasn't able to get the amount of space that was required. And another part of this, too, is her area was Stratford, where she wanted to get this going. And that's where I have the most feeding complaints. So I think attempting to address this from a feeding perspective versus a culling perspective will be able to negate her complaint without resorting to killing the deer.
All right, so we're getting rid of the whole hunting thing, not just the
Yeah,
crossbow. So the ordinance that we passed a couple years ago, we're now getting rid of.
Yeah, it was 2016. So in 4 years, we've just
Okay.
not, it's not worked for us.
And it's just because of the 5-acre thing?
Yeah.
And some other concerns. I don't think this recent applicant, Mrs. Ream, had a hunter in mind. And when we met with ODNR, to hear that the limited number of deer that we can take out with a culling program, it's more for our residents to satisfy our residents. Well, we've only had her apply. We've had some others discuss it through the 4 years, but then never come to the table with an application. So at this point, we think there are other ways where we can manage the deer
So
in a better fashion.
what's the limit? What's the culling limit?
There isn't necessarily a limit. It's just that when we discussed how realistic this would be with ODNR, he said at most that he's seen people get 1 or 2 deer. And when we have herds of 10 to 15, it's not going to make a dent.
So have you talked with them about doing a culling program in Parma Heights?
Well,
I know when I talked to the gentleman, he said that nobody from Parma Heights ever asked them to do that. Did you ask them to look into that,
When you
maybe?
say him, you mean Jeffrey
Yes,
Westerfield from
I'm sorry,
ODNR?
yes, yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, we had meetings with him, we've exchanged emails. We had a couple hours session with him.
he never made any mention that that'd be something that he would be willing to get started. And as a matter of fact, ODNR, any culling programs that you're thinking of, is normally run and mandated by the metro parks.
Right.
So if ODNR wanted some involvement with that, he didn't make that clear to me. And I think as far as the metro parks go, we don't really have that much space to safely do a culling program.
So in other parts of the country, ODNR, they run the program. Here in Ohio, it's cities first, and then they're in a backup role.
Okay.
So do you have some reservations of not going forward with this?
No, I mean, I didn't like the crossbow or longbow anyway. But I think we should look at something. And when I spoke with him, he did say that he was never asked to look into a culling program.
That's
So-
not accurate. We spoke with him at length about
Did
it.
he talk about that here?
We talked about.
And he said it's not,
He said realistically, if we did start such a program, we would get 1 or 2 deer. That was the extent of the
even
conversation.
through the
we
Metro
had.
Park?
Well, the metro parks, he doesn't have anything to do with. That would be, the metro parks are completely separate.
They
from
have their own
ODNR.
culling.
Okay, so do we talk to the Metro Parks then?
No, I did not.
No.
Is that something we want to look at?
Well, they continue to run their program, so that's separate from what we're doing here. So I'm not quite sure your point of how that ties.
Well, if we're getting rid of this and people wanted to have some kind of, it's like you're taking this out and not giving another option.
Well,
So that means like the deer, besides not feeding them or putting a thing up higher.
Well, so if we look at it from the one resident that has applied to do it, who is on Stratford, I have several addresses on Stratford. They hand feed the deer. They have troughs set up for the deer. I
Yeah,
think
it's all over.
Well, right, but I think being able to address these residents and say, hey, you can't leave this feed out, that will make the herds of deer less congregated in that area.
You know, certainly the deer are an issue, there's no question. I mean, all these cities face this issue. I think that the feed will certainly be a start to this, and I think if it ever got to a point where several years down the line, this became such a massive issue, we would probably, like the metro parks, we would probably take action as a police department. But we're not there yet. I mean, it's not like we have a large number of MVAs involving deer. We don't have that right now. Are they an issue? Yes, but it's manageable.
Okay. That's all I needed to know. Thank you.
I do have a question. On feeding the deer, what is the timetable to reduce, or the estimated timetable to reduce the deer population? So we passed the new ordinance that you cannot feed the deer on the 1st of November. Are we looking at the 1st of November 2021? It's going to be having an effect on the population, or is it 2022, or do you have any data on that?
Well, so, like I said, one of the biggest complaints that I have here are people feeding the deer. I
Understood.
think as soon as we get this language in the books and I can enforce it, I do foresee us seeing less concentrated herds of deer as soon as I can tell people that they're doing something unlawful.
Okay.
So I wouldn't know when specifically to see an improvement, but I would assume it'd be soon, especially if the food source has been removed. I think that deer are habitual feeders. If they know there's going to be dinner somewhere, that's where they're going to go. So I think
Right.
that the more frequently they visit and they see there's no food, they're going to move on.
Thank you.
Especially on Stratford and yours over there, we have people passionate on both sides, people
Oh,
that
I know.
feed, people, of course.
Trust
this is
me, I
really
know.
constant calling. You understand.
I know, I got
And it's
13 of
such a
them in my
balance.
yard every day going back and forth, so I know, but, yeah.
And one thing we learned from Jeffrey with ODNR is we could always put a survey out to our residents, and we're considering a number of things here, because we recognize that it's an issue.
I have another question if Anthony's done. Are you
I'm
done?
I'm good.
Is there
I'm good,
going to be a
thank you.
fine if you go out more than once to tell people?
Yes,
Stop feeding the deer? Do we know what the fine's going to be?
It would start as a minor misdemeanor. If the offense continued past, then probably an M4 at most.
I'm sorry, how much?
An M4 at most. So normally with our feeding ordinance now, it's a minor misdemeanor for a first offense. If I
Okay.
cite you and then continuing the behavior is an M4 each time I go out.
And
So
is-
for example, these people that are very passionate about it, if they decide not to comply with it, it's a warning, then it's a citation, and then I just keep citing each time I go out and witness the behavior.
What's the amount of the citation?
Well, that would be up to in court. It'd be an M and then an M4.
Okay,
I
so,
think it's $250 maximum fine for an M4.
okay, thank you.
roughly. We don't deal with a lot of
Yeah.
M4s. We did have a gal, and I think she lived on Stratford. She's lived here 61 years. She likes to feed the deer. She was so upset and said, I'm going to continue to do this. We had a good meeting with her in my office, and we gave her all the reasons why. Listen, here's why we're asking for your cooperation, and we got it. So it's just working with people.
Okay,
And we
no,
do
I just
think
want to
this is
know,
gonna
so if
help.
people ask, I
Sure.
can say they're,
Absolutely.
because citations are issued and never really followed up on, so we can let them know. I think if you put $1 on it
Right.
and make it,
I'll definitely give you the fine for an M4. I'm pretty sure it's $250, but again.
okay.
Renee,
That's
number
good.
2. I have a, wait. I actually have 2 questions.
Did she say number 2?
The metro parks, if they want to call here, it's different, they have different rules than the property owners in the city of Parma Heights,
That's
right?
correct. That's
So,
a separate program.
right, so if they want to call there, they don't need an ordinance.
No, they
To
wouldn't
allow
need
them
anything
to.
from us. They're a total separate entity.
Okay, that's what I thought. And my other question is my recollection on the history of this ordinance, and Mr. Picorni could probably be a better resource, but what I remember is, we have this deer problem, and there's the 2 sides, love them, don't love them. And North Royalton, we worked with North Royalton on this ordinance, and in their city, they obviously have bigger lots that, and the last I heard, I don't think anybody in North Royalton has taken them up on this either. I could be wrong. But my point is, we took a lot of flack when we passed this from the animal lovers. If they can't get the contiguous acres, can we leave it be for a little bit? See if you can't feed the deer, let's see how that works. And then if we, within 6 months, a year, or whatever, I don't know what their mating season or whatever is, then talk about getting rid of it. I just feel it was a very controversial issue to get this passed. And some people were happy.
Yeah, I'd
Some
be
people
more
were
than
happy
comfortable,
that
and
they
I
were given an option.
Right.
even
Yeah, I think
though-
that's a
I
really
think
good
to put a
idea.
stay on it, evaluate the feeding, possibly a survey, I don't have an issue with that. We were involved with like 5 or 6 other cities, and to my knowledge, I don't believe Parma, because Miranda's looked into this, has done a deer culling. I think Royalton may have.
Yeah, that's,
They
think
have it. I
there
don't know
were
if
a
they've
couple,
used it.
And it was a hard thing when we passed it, because people were not, you of anybody should know that, with I love animals, I
Sure.
don't want them being killed. That if we could maybe revisit this in the future after maybe your idea of not feeding them and if it does, then it's a moot point here.
Right. I don't have issue with that. I just think for a city this size, and then listening to Jeffrey about, hey, you're a hunter, and maybe taking out 2 deer, what's 2 deer do for us versus the people on Stratford that love deer? Gosh. And then he's talking about, well, we don't want a hunter to shoot the neighbor's dog, and I'm thinking,
Right. And I think
Some of
this was,
Right.
Not comfortable.
yeah, and I think this was all discussed before we passed it, and we all knew there was no way anybody was going to get 5 contiguous acres to do this.
It's different.
But we were trying to tell the residents, yes, we are aware that you have a problem, that there is a problem. We're trying the best we can. And I think that's why this was looked into and passed, because I guess if they could get the 5 acres, then people are really PO'd about these deer, you know. But obviously, in 4 years, not a single person has been able to get enough neighbors to say, hey, let's do this.
Correct.
You know, I mean, it's just an idea that, I just know that it was very controversial to get it passed as it was.
Yeah,
So-
that's the thinking, and we readdress this at some point, and we try and take the actions we feel are necessary. I'm comfortable with that. Miranda?
Yeah, I think that's great. And that way too, if the feeding doesn't make the amount of impact that we want, we can readdress looking at this as a possibility.
Yeah, administratively, on whatever council decides, but Councilwoman, you're absolutely right, this was a regional approach, was taken by 5 or 6 other cities, they asked us for support. It was more of a, we went along to show support, that we wanted to show cooperation as that was implemented. As you move south, it's definitely, they take more advantage of it in Broadview Heights and North Royalton, even Brecksville, but you've got the Metro Parks and Cuyahoga Valley, National Recreation in Brecksville too. But I know administratively, and as well as Mike McCorn, we spoke earlier today, if you'd like to leave that into the book, we'll just move on and really try to concentrate on the feeding, reducing the feeding, educating the residents, most importantly. I think that's a step in the right direction.
I agree.
I mean, I don't know what everybody else thinks, I just,
No, it's a valid point, Councilwoman.
No, that's, I mean, it's better to have more than not enough. But if we do stay with this, there are a few things I think that need to be addressed in it, but that's for another day.
Okay, great. All right, I think we're all on the same page with that. Okay, so my next one is we have animal abuse, animal cruelty, that's 618.04. And I also included in this animal care standards, animal neglect, that's 618.03. I'm not sure if you guys have a copy of that one. But both of these are our neglect and our cruelty ordinances for Parma Heights. Both of these are great. I've used these in Parma and I've used them in Brooklyn. They're phenomenal. They give me what I need if I do come face to face with abuse situations. But unfortunately, we had 2 instances almost back to back of abuse to a raccoon. And the language in these ordinances states domestic animals. So in this situation with these raccoons, I wasn't able to charge the person with cruelty, which I wish I could have. The first instance was someone who had used a leg hold trap in their backyard, which is no reputable trapper would ever use such a thing. It's like those bear traps that clamp shut and the raccoon's arm got caught on it. It got called in by a neighbor who heard it screaming, and that was very distressing. Her kids were out there. So I had to euthanize the raccoon, but just something like that, it's just, he should have been cited and I couldn't do it. The second instance was there was a raccoon with distemper that a resident shot in the head with a crossbow and didn't kill it. So it was just on the sidewalk and I had to euthanize that animal as well. In that situation, the person who shot it with a crossbow just was really nonchalant about it, thought he did the right thing. And in those situations, it's just because it's a raccoon doesn't mean it doesn't matter. And I wish that I could have held him more accountable than what I was able to. So in these 2 ordinances, really the only change that I want to make is removing the word domestic. So it's just animal, which includes any animal on both of them.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, I can be a big pain. What about rats and mice? I mean, you know, we put our, even in your own home, where I work, we have mice traps because we have mice.
So actually,
Where would that fall into this?
so in our poisoning, we actually do have a exemption if you are acting to, I can read you exactly what it says. Let me find it here.
Is it in the 61804?
It should be in 61821. nuisance rodent are included. If you look in section E, poisoning, that language we added in because when you do have issues with mice and rodents, that's more of a public safety issue. So that's why we allow it in those situations. But in these two instances, a raccoon is not an imminent threat to you. And especially if I'm on my way to handle the situation, you know, taking it into your own hands, especially in a way that these guys did, I mean, it's out of the realm of acceptable to me.
So do you think it would be, behoove us to add into 61804A, language, except for those animals contained in 16821E? So we are real clear on it?
You mean
I don't think
adding
it's-
some language to the effect that, like, rodents and mice? would be
Right,
exempt
that
from
we
this?
just say refer to,
I don't think that's.
No, I want there to be discussion before the recommendation is taken. Councilwoman?
I don't think that that's necessary. I mean, we have it in the other, and this is, I don't really think people think trapping a mouse or a rat in your house in a trap is cruel.
I mean, I'm
and
just.
it's listed in the other ordinance, so, I mean, that's just my opinion. I just think that this is
I mean, just so
definitely,
that we're clear, you know, because, you know, next year, rats, you know, Willard was good back in the 70s. No,
no, I think it's clear.
I'm showing my age. Even Anthony or the mayor don't smile.
I'm smiling, you just can't see me.
I would agree with Councilwoman Everett. I think we're okay.
I think it's clear enough.
I would agree with that. It is okay, too.
You guys good with it too? Could you
Oh,
write the
absolutely.
ticket?
This just gives Miranda
Okay.
that leverage if there's something that's just, again, as she said, not acceptable. But that case, no, that's clear that's
Yeah,
not.
it's not an issue.
Violation.
Does anyone have any questions or hesitation with that?
Is there any, I'm sorry, is there any resident training materials that's available so that they know what, like, as you stated in your examples, they thought they were doing the right thing?
Yeah.
You don't know, you don't know. So is there a place that they can go to get the correct information on what's allowed, what's not allowed?
Yeah, so actually, you know the circular that goes to all the residents? The last one that came out, I put in a little section about feeding the wildlife. I think staying with that and like putting little excerpts about different ordinances that we have, different laws that we have pertaining to animals could be a good resource. And, you know, I try to upkeep the Facebook page with information. Not that many people pay attention to it, but, and in this situation, maybe that wasn't the best wording. I think that the gentleman with the crossbow, I think that was the stance that he took because he was trying to downplay the issue. I'm sure that the reality of it was upsetting to him and he was trying to deflect attention type of thing. Because especially, he didn't kill it, so.
Right.
I'm not sure if he genuinely thought he was doing the right thing or just trying to spin me a tail type of thing.
I think the frustrating part in that situation was he knows we're responding, the officers are responding, we called Miranda out for this.
Right.
We'll take care of it in a humane way.
Right.
Versus the kids in the neighborhood that seeing this raccoon struggle, he didn't put it down.
Right.
And in the other case, those are just barbaric traps. I mean, I certainly would think someone would know better, but it's a great point. If we can put something up even on the website, to
Right.
educate people makes sense.
Right, I mean, everything we're doing is great, but if nobody knows it, it's almost useless. So I
Right.
think it's very important to do both, because if you don't, it's not going to help you.
I would agree. Yeah, I think.
That would be my
on our
recommendation.
site,
I'm sorry.
certainly
No,
try
that's
to do what
valid.
makes sense.
just have a quick question for the chief. Going back to talk earlier about calling, have we had any discussions about doing that in-house?
We have not. We've just not reached that point where it's like we're dealing with MVAs daily, and there are just so many issues with driving and situations that we're not at that point. No, definitely not.
I have nothing.
There's nothing else. I'd like to thank Miranda and Chief. Thanks for your time and your
Thanks,
expertise.
Just real quick, I just want to mention, so we had our first Citizens Police Academy that graduated last year. We had a delay with COVID. We're running another second Citizens Police Academy in January. of '21. And then in the fall, we're running a Fall Academy in '21. So I certainly would invite all of you. It's every Wednesday at Tri-C. We're partners with Tri-C to cut costs. The first one was very successful. It's a 10-week program plus graduation, and every Wednesday night, it's at Tri-C, and there's a different topic on law enforcement. And our first one, people raved about it, so we're proud of it.
You said in January that's going to start?
That's correct. If you
Okay.
want an application or something you're interested or know someone,
Yeah.
we certainly would like as many Parma Heights residents as we can get. And
Where do you get the
again,
applications?
you can contact me.
Just get 'em
We're
for me.
working on a little online application.
okay.
So that's what we're working on now. We obviously have a little bit of time, but please let me know.
Okay, yeah, definitely. Thank you.
President, is it appropriate to ask the chief a question on another matter? I received a phone call yesterday from a Kingsdale Boulevard resident, and I just wanted to see if the chief could shed any light on it. Okay,
Not at all. Sure.
thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay, as the chief and Miranda exit, I've asked Director Patton as well as Director Piccone to come in. We've got two housekeeping items, items 2 and items 3, the petroleum fuel bid, as well as the Board of Health contract will come in. As you're well aware, these are two housekeeping items. All right, item number 2, Dennis, is the petroleum fuel and lubricant bid.
Yeah, this is the housekeeping we do every year, put the fuel back up for bid. We accept all the bidders, and then we make a phone call every time we need to order fuel. Same program. Appreciate council's consideration.
Do you know what the current bids are, or the current pricing is for
No,
fuel?
it
Changes daily.
several times a day.
Right,
So we always make that call. We call each vendor when we're ready to order fuel. Whoever has the lowest price, we lock in, and then we take it from them.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Any questions for Mr. Patton?
Is that one reading?
What do you plan on having, what do you plan on having before us?
The next regular council meeting?
That's not in, is that in some legislation, because for bids that are,
It's an ordinance, yeah, for bid, yeah.
just one meeting?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Does anyone have an objection to one meeting? Thank you.
Welcome.
Well, that was easy, Dennis, thank you.
Thanks, Mayor.
Item number 3 is Mr. Piccone, another housekeeping issue, the Board of Health contract. Mike?
Thank you, Mayor. In your packet, you have a letter from the Health Commissioner to the Mayor. The highlight there would be that the contract that the board is asking for would be from January 1st, 2021 through December 31st of 21. That's a little different than the contract we have right now, which was a 2-year contract. The per capita cost for the new contract is $5.40. And on page 2 of the contract, which is attached, you'll see that the total cost per year for calendar year 2021 is $112,913. And the rate, going back to the per capita rate, which that 112 is based on, is the same as the current contract. So there is no increase in the rate charged to the city in contract year 2021. The District Advisory Council approves this contract at a board meeting in March. So that council's approved the contract. They're waiting for now the cities, but us included, to approve this, and then it goes to the Ohio Department of Health for final sign-off. So the Board of Health is anxious for us to pass this contract, approve it, and then get it back to them so they can get the signatures.
Are you requesting suspension on this, even though it doesn't expire until December?
Well, yeah, I would get a suspension on it so that we could get it signed here and then get it back to the Board of Health.
Is there any objection to suspending this?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, the last item on the caucus is item number 4. It's appointments to the planning commission. I think the majority of you, if not all of you, are very familiar with Bill Litton. He is a lifelong resident of Parma Heights. He currently lives on Fernhurst. He's a retired teacher from the Cleveland Heights School District. He recently was a finalist for the Ward 3 open council position. He's extensive knowledge and operations here within the city as a former director of the Recreation Department. He has worked through the city for many years. He has served under 3 different mayors, Cassidy, Zanatti, and myself. I think that Bill would be an excellent addition to an already strong planning commission. It was hard to replace a member that we just lost, current Councilman Tom Round, but I did my best with Mr. Litton. I think that he will fill Tom's shoes admirably. So during the council meeting, I would ask your consideration as well as approval of Mr. Litton to the planning commission. I'll take any questions, if anybody's got any questions or comments.
President, thank you.
Okay. Very good, I appreciate that.